In this episode of the Mysterialis podcast, we have a guest, Sarah the Intuitive. She connects with the other side, she is a sensitive, she has intuition, and can peer into the other realm. We discuss corners of rooms, ghosts, spirits, haunted locations. She's from the UK. It's a very interesting episode. Check it out, watch it from beginning to end. You will not be disappointed. I'm your host, John Razimus. I thank you for listening.
Yeah, my name is Sarah. I live in Manchester, England, and I've been living here for 4 years. I used to live in America, and I consider myself an intuitive. I prefer that term. I now live in Manchester, England. I've been here for 4 years, but I'm moving back to Ireland, where I'm originally from, at the end of this year. So that's the plan at the moment.
Okay.
So back to your work and your videos. I was watching the last one regarding, is it the OK Corral?
Well, I didn't go to the OK Corral this time. I just went to a saloon that Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and Virgil Earp and the different famous cowboys used to frequent, but it used to be called the Grand Hotel, but it burned down, but the basement still existed, and the saloon was in the basement, so the saloon is still there.
Yeah. I tried to tune in to your video a little bit to see what was just like remotely, you can tune into the energy of a place remotely through like its form of psychometry. And it feels like what was down in the basement, it was a male. There was a figure of a man. And there was a ghost down there, but it was one, and it didn't seem to have any desire to say anything. I didn't get like it wanted to communicate or a message necessarily, but there was one figure down there from tuning in from this side.
Okay.
So yeah, there was someone down there.
Yeah.
Also, you were saying that you had a theory that people don't hang around where they died and that they are at peace and go straight over to the other side.
I'd say most of the time.
Most of the time, you're correct on that, John. And from my experience. But I'm going to elaborate a little bit where there may be some subtleties in that theory. What happens if there's a violent death? If someone has met a violent death, we are like, there's a lot of things regarding energy. And if you suffer a violent death, quite often a chunk of that person's energy that emanates from their soul can become displaced and landlocked. And if it's a big enough chunk that comes off, and quite often it is in a traumatic violent death, that chunk of energy becomes what we call a soul shard or a specter, which in itself will have its own rudimentary form of consciousness, and it will appear as a ghost. That's not the soul of the person. They've moved on, but a chunk of them is still left behind. And sometimes, if it's big enough, it'll seem to have its own intelligence, the same markers of the personality, but there's still some limitations in terms of self-awareness and kind of being landlocked to the location often as well. So there's limited movement, limited self-awareness, but there's still some there, and sometimes an ability to communicate as well. But that's not the actual person. That's a piece of the person that's left behind. Quite often with shamanic rituals where they do soul retrieval, it's to do it reuniting those parts.
Okay.
So in a lot of these places, you're going to actually end up encountering what we call those landlocked pieces and not the actual soul, even though it takes, there's a difference energetically between the two, and sometimes that's difficult to tell the difference. And having had experience with several mediums from having. I've done a few paranormal investigations in the past. They're not something I'm into too much, but having been with other people and learning from what they're perceiving in a group of mediums who all perceive something differently, that some of them are actually a lot. Only one of the group could actually tell the difference when going on a ghost hunting investigation between an actual soul and what we call, I call it a shard of that person that's left behind, like a piece.
Okay.
So I thought it was really interesting regarding you. When you said that, I'm like, yeah, it's mostly true. He's onto something there.
Yeah, I did go. I did go to the OK Corral a couple years ago, and I walked 10 feet, and that's in my first video. It's a little bit old, but I walked 10 feet into the OK Corral area way before I got to the gunshot site. There's just a wagon area where people had their wagons and horses, and a spirit walked right through me. Now, I don't know if it was a tourist spirit, but I didn't get the sense that it was any of the spirits that had anything to do with the gunfight.
No. Quite often, something that walks through you, that's kind of usually something, a personal guide. So you may have a personal guide that will give you that sensation. Usually someone that is just hanging around the facility in spirit won't really walk through you. I don't know. I can't say. That is, I can't discern a meaning specifically to that experience, but I do believe that was a spirit.
Yeah. See, I don't have any John Edward type abilities. I can't hear them tell me something. I can't judge their race.
You got more going on than you realize. Quite often, a lot of it's subconscious, where you pick up on something and you don't realize that you did, and you just think you're making your educated guess, but sometimes you make more than educated guess. You just don't realize it.
Well, I don't know their name. I don't know anything about their backstory, stuff like that.
Okay. Okay, that's all fine. I think I still love your channel. You're doing well.
Thank you.
Yeah. If there's one place I'm going to recommend, is San Francisco. Is a really haunted city.
Okay. Yeah, I've been there a bunch of times. I went to Chinatown a couple months ago, and they shoot firecrackers like all year round. It's pretty fun.
I'll tell you one story before we'll go on to some topics that we have for today. Mm-hmm. One of my experiences I had in San Francisco was that, what was it again? It was that, the trolleys, the little tram trolley
Mm-hmm.
lines.
Yeah.
There's like this historical repair shop for them on one of the hills where they used to come and maintain those trams. And yeah, so I went in there and, the regular tourist stuff. Mm-hmm. And I noticed there's a plaque where there's a commemorative plaque for 3 dogs that died because they were guard dogs of the workshop. And these burglars actually threw in poison meat into the workshop so the dogs would eat the meat, and then the dogs got sick and they were immobilized, and then they burgled the workshop for pieces, and then the dogs, they couldn't save them, they died, and they were dead by the next morning when the owners found them. And I actually stood to pay tribute to the dogs. I was actually said a prayer and says, you know what, God, that sucks. And I salute you, doggies, And I felt really touched by that. That they put up a plaque with little pictures, these little carved relief motifs on this plaque, showing the actual dogs and the dogs' names. Mm-hmm. And what touched me was that the owners went through so much effort commemorating it. And I was just like, oh my God, they really loved them back 100 years ago. This isn't just like now. And when I did that, it was the soul of one of the dog owners came in, and he was wearing a flat cap, is kind of tweed, wearing a workman's shirt, and the clothes of the era. And he gave a little wink. He was a little bit flirty, actually. Yeah, he did. He came in, and he Oh, I couldn't quite discern what it was that he was trying to say. He did come in though, and he did greet me, and he showed me what he looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he belonged to the store. So after that event was over, I went to see my friend who's a professional medium in San Francisco, and I told her about who I met at the place. So I was kind of just training my skills,
Mm-hmm.
and when we started talking about him, he appeared again elsewhere. We were elsewhere at this point, and she says the reason why he came in. He says, "Thank you for honoring the dogs. They meant a lot to us, and nobody ever really notices our plaque when they come and visit. They just walk in, look around, and then they leave." And they don't really stop and take time to kind of notice that we made a lot of effort with that, and we like it that someone kind of paid tribute to them in kind of taking that time.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he really did come in. So I like to, how will I say, test whatever it is might perceive. I like to have friends and people I know to kind of see what they say to make sure what I'm perceiving is something that's really there versus something that's in my imagination. And like, no, I got this down now, where I can kind of hone in and make sure I'm not projecting anything, and it's just something from outside of myself as opposed to inside myself, because that's really important with discernment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you said that the guy didn't really, the first time you saw him, he didn't say anything. What I've noticed, and then the second time you were able to get a message, but what I've noticed is a lot of times spirits communicate non-verbally, like almost like they don't, almost, it's almost like they can show hand gestures a lot easier than a vocal message.
Yeah,
I just noticed that.
yeah. For me, pictorially is there's a range of senses going on, and because this is actually takes a lot of work and effort, and also the person's personal vibration. So you have an aura, and the quality of the light that you emit also helps with the communication, because what spirit does, it uses some of your personal energy field to use that as part of communication. And if you're someone with a very weak aura, they can't use that energy to create sensations for communication, and that's really important as well. So there's a lot going on. But I have been able to get messages since I've tried. That was still when I was pretty early on when I was trying to practice.
Mm-hmm. I can say I've received messages in dreams when I'm full-blown sleeping, but in the daytime waking, I don't think too often. But I do know that pets that we have, animals, that pass on can leave messages. Like, we're on the other side and we're all right. Really simple messages like that.
That's a whole big topic that a lot of people are very sensitive to, so I tend not to go too much into it, because people are very attached to animals. Normally, most animals, their individuality does not survive after death. They get recycled into what they call a group consciousness. But if a human has an attachment to a pet, it will be through other beings on the other side. They will actually save that animal and keep its individuality and keep it for you as a pet to help you when you die and cross over. Because a lot of people are scared about dying, John, but it happens to us all, whether we like it or not. So yeah, nearly everyone's domestic pets are kept. I think there's like a zookeeper that was really attached to a giraffe that was on his deathbed, and he said, "My last wish is to see the giraffe." And they wheeled him all the way out to see the giraffe. But I bet you when that giraffe's dead, he'll see the giraffe on the other side, because that animal meant a lot to him. So it's got there's no limit. As long as there's a love connection, a heart connection, it'll be kept, and you'll see him. I know that for certain, from experience.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Harland Williams, the comedian, but Harland Williams, he frequently is having a conversation with an atheist, and there's a lot of atheists in comedy, and so in show business in Hollywood. And so he says to them, if they ever bring up spirituality, he says it's free to believe there might be something out there. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to join a church to have an open mind. Maybe there's something out there. Maybe there's another side. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. So,
John, the irony of that, I love that what you were saying. The irony of that was that in the Bible, what Jesus did was preached on hills and not in synagogues, saying that you did not need the church or its leaders. And he told people to connect from inside of themselves, that they were free beings to do that. And it annoyed a lot of people, and people did not like that at the time. So it's like, you know what? That message is as impertinent today as it was back then, because you can see the relevance there and exactly what you just said.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm open to agnostics, and I try to make the channel inclusive, not exclusive. I try not to bash on any particular denomination or any group or any belief system. And I do get emails from people saying, oh, you should totally bash this group. No, I don't want to totally bash that group. I'll just get a lot of hate from that group. For all I know, 10% of my subscribers are that group. I just want to share the truth, you know?
John, follow your heart on that, what feels right to you, because you are coming from a good place. And I know that because I would not be talking to you if I didn't think that was true.
Okay.
Because I don't normally, there's only very few people that I will even have this conversation with, like we're having right now. And I think you are coming, I say trust you and where you are coming from. It's good. You're coming from the right place, I'll say. You're coming from the right place.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to talk about a little bit of the corners of rooms.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, let's get into the corners of rooms.
Mm-hmm. I just want to mention the first comment I think I saw of yours was on probably my first Corners of Rooms video, and you said something to the effect of, see, I screenshot the good ones because they're pretty good, and I wanted to save the good comments. So I have a good 30 to 40 screenshotted comments about Corners of Rooms amongst my maybe 10 videos on the subject. And you said that I think you went on a tour in the UK, and the tour guide says, oh, this is where the spirit lives, or something to that effect, or where it manifests. And you were the only person in the group that could sense the energy of it actually being there, almost like the ghost plays a role in the tour. And can you elaborate on that?
It was a ghost. It was a ghost walk tour in the neighborhood I live. Mm-hmm. I live in Manchester, so it is a suburb of Manchester where there's a ghost walk tour, and it's still on. They still do it. I know that person. They're actually a 10-minute walk from here, and they say it's the ghost of a policeman. I don't think it is. I personally think it's what I call a messer. It's someone that pretends to be who they wish it would be, because if there's a genuine spirit connection, usually it's for a reason. It's usually there's a heart connection, meaning it's done out of love or a reason where, you know, to bring comfort or advice. And this is entertainment. And there's also a sense of intrusion and voyeurism. I don't think it's really that person, to be honest. He says it is. I don't like the way it feels. And to be honest, that what I felt in the corner of the room was a portal and not that person. It was actually a portal where that spirit comes through, not the ghost. Okay. Because he does the ghost tours frequent, because he's frequently having a seance in that room and invoking this supposed spirit. There's a continuous open portal where they're continuously coming in, and then it's kind of established a portal there, an energetic kind of spot in the corner where they're coming in through frequently, where it's leaving this residue, and it's in that corner. But it's nothing I'm interested in. I don't think I'm done with it. Well,
I still thought it was a really good comment, and that goes with my theory of I think spirits can use corners of rooms, why I created this entire set, as portals, and I don't understand the mechanics behind it, but it's some type of mechanic of the universe where they do naturally, if they're going to pick a spot in a room, a corner is going to be like a default. They just prefer it for some reason. But did you get a negative vibe from that spirit? Is that why you say?
Well, I got it not necessarily from the spirit. It was a neutral one, but I did get a negative vibe from the portal. Okay. The portal had negative energy.
Yeah.
I have some theories as to how they form. When in a room where spirits are frequently invoked, a portal forms. Even though I'm going to talk about that a little later in why some places are more haunted than others.
Okay.
Back to the basics of corners. Corners are the least disturbed and most likely to accumulate stagnant energy in a room. So if people are, we are actually energetic beings. We emit energy from our fields that, because there's residue from human activity that are living, not dead, but living, that, just permeates a room. So human activity permeates, because if a spirit can leave energy in a room and leave it feeling like bad vibes, human people can do the same thing. And what happens is that, the way you have lint or little dust bunnies that gather in the corners of rooms or near skirting boards? Same thing happens energetically. That's my theory. We have like lint, energy, like static energy gathering up in corners. And also because those corners see the least foot traffic as well. So they're kind of it's undisturbed, and it leaves this kind of stagnant, static energy trapped that's not really being disturbed because nobody tends to hang around or walk into the corner. It tends to be left alone. So I think that makes it more vulnerable to sustaining a portal in there. That's my theory.
Yeah, I agree with that. Feng Shui, the Chinese masters of Feng Shui would agree with that. They have written about it in their books. I have one book that I randomly picked up. I just scroll. It was a $1 book sale at the library. So I quickly went through this Feng Shui book looking for a corners of room section, knowing that they do talk about room placement and organization for the purpose of energy flow and stuff like that. And it did have a corners of rooms tiny little sentence where it basically said that energy builds up and you want the flow to be positive. And I see spirits wanting to watch, for example, the watchers. Let's say they watch us. That's their job. They're not going to be hanging out in the middle of the room where you can walk through them. They're going to hang out in the corner. It's just a natural place where they're not going to be disturbed. Even though they're invisible, a lot of these spirits are obsessed with being as invisible as possible. Even though they're already invisible, it's a very illogical thing, seemingly, until you realize they really prefer corners for some reason.
There was a really negative entity with a really bad energy. I'm not going to go into details. I actually know who this person was. This person actually had killed somebody before they died. And they were I know of this person before they passed on, and this person ended up in my friend's house, and she said I couldn't get rid of him. He was hanging about because my friend who lives locally is also a medium. She can tell when he's there. He's a very unique energetic signature that's kind of very unique to him and unusual. And she can tell if it's him coming in or not. And that's the best marker, is what we call feeling the energy of somebody. As the rest they can fool you with. So she said, I thought I got rid of him. But, an hour and a half later, I was saging the corners of the rooms to make sure nothing was left behind. And, I found him again. He was watching me in the corner of that room the entire hour and a half. And I was like, bleep you, get the hell out of my house. And so she smudged the corners, and eventually he went. But he was watching. So I know what you're saying, John, because when you say that, I laugh because it's like, yeah, we had that.
Yeah. Yeah, when I had my corner of room experiment, number one, I had a sense that after I did it, I attracted some negative spirit, and it literally stalked me for a couple months. It's gone now, but it was not worth it, and that's why I put the warnings up. The warnings look like a joke because there's so many fake, haunted ghost investigation channels out there, ghost hunting channels. We're talking the top YouTubers that are comedians slash actors. They'll have a fake Ouija session where they fake the whole thing. And they'll have a warning as a joke. And they don't believe in it, and they're full-blown non-believers in the subject. And they do it for clickbait and for views. But as for me, about 3 months, this entity bothered me. It's gone now, but it was pretty freaky.
Yeah, Spirit says that your experiences are real. So you are not a fake person. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you. Your experiences are genuine, and I just want your viewers to know that some of you there's some critics that would say, "Oh, you're a attention seeker," as they would with a lot of the other channels. And I just want to say that your experiences are genuine from yours, and that's from my side tuning into your side.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Also, with the feng shui, the northeast corner, they say, of a house or a room is the most vulnerable to portal formation. I don't go investigating enough portals to see how true that is. Going in with a compass, maybe I should. And if I was investigating that, I would get a compass out and check out, is there more likely for a portal to be formed in the northeast corner of a room or a house? But I found that really interesting. They call it Demon's Gate. Believe it? Demon's Gate is called the northeast corner of a room or a house. And they also say that the ideal room is a room with no corners.
Yeah, I have heard that a couple times. There's a fictional story from an H.P. Lovecraft or someone to that effect, and someone sent me this story. And it's a fictional story, but some guy was so scared of entities that he patched up and plastered up every corner of his room to the point where it was rounded. And I thought that was interesting. It's a fictional story, but you can see it in non-fictional stories as well. And people like H.P. Lovecraft, they tended to mix their nightmares with what really happened, perhaps astrally, I don't know, but his nightmares are very vivid, and he wrote them down. And a lot of the horror writers of today get their ideas from dreams. Some of them are inspired by some truth,
Yeah, that's really interesting. Wow, what an unusual piece of information to make into fiction like that. Either he did his research or something happened to him personally. But I like that. I like those unusual connections.
What corner was the Devil's Gate?
The northeast corner.
Okay, well, I could show you right here. I don't want to show my location necessarily because some people try to bother me. But it is northeast. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Northeast. I have gone to the extent where I have gone on Google Maps and did look at the locations, because about 4, 5, 6 corners I have synced up to see if they're all the same, and some of them are different. So I did write it down, but I didn't come to anything conclusive on that.
They call the southwest corner the exit gate, though. They say that if a spirit comes in the northeast, it leaves on the southwest. I don't know how true that is. I personally think they come in and out the same corner. Personally.
Yeah.
No offense. Yeah, I think they come in at the same place.
I did definitely during the 5.5 months in 2011. The spirit seemed to enter and exit in the same corner, but I couldn't see it, so I had to just guess when it entered and guess when it exited, based on the creaks that it would make. So there was a lot of guesswork going on because I can never see the entity. They're always invisible optically to me. Unless they're knocking something over, I can make a good guess they're right there, you know?
Even it's kind of based on a feng shui principle that if a spirit enters the room, it travels in a straight line. So therefore, something to do with the very opposite straight line corner. The opposite corner would be a straight line. But the thing is that if you see orbs, they do travel in straight lines, but it tends to be in zigzags. So things like furniture being in the way and things that, feng shui would say, it's just like, if you're talking about actual spirits, none of that's an actual hazard or a problem, so I wouldn't worry about it. But
yeah. I got a comment. Someone said they read somewhere that the spirits only walk in I guess, squares. And from my experience, I have had a spirit walk through me, and it made a zigzag during the process of walking through me. I could feel it enter and then almost exit in a zigzag. So they can move just like an orb.
Yeah. I like you said that. That's funny. You said zigzag as well. So I like that you had that experience and were able to compare those experiences. We'll go on to. I think that's on the corners of rooms that I personally would have to say right now.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, we'll move on to why are some places more haunted than others. I wrote down a few notes on this just to kind of recap, because I did have a few things to say from experience. There are some places that I've kind of come across on day-to-day life in town. Like, where are you going to, just on day-to-day life, when spirits hang around in the city, they come in and out. Some hang around and some are there because their loved ones are there as well. And they come in and out briefly, and some hang about a bit. And usually I'm really suspect of anything that hangs out. That's not good. Any spirit that hangs around usually is trouble. Yeah. They're looking for something. It's usually not something good. All right, so the corner of a mall, which sold religious idols and statues. So there's a little store in the corner of a mall that sold kind of figurines from like Hinduism. There was once some angels from Christianity. There was a couple of pagan statues from dragons. This was in the corner of a mall. Big spirit portal in this section. Even the lady in the store knew there was. She goes, some people come in and say they feel a funny static in the air when they come into my store. And I'm like, I felt it from the other end of the mall when I was coming in. I was like, there's a static in here somewhere. There's spirit activity, and I don't know where yet. And I eventually found this, because I was actually looking for incense, and so I found it at the store, and I was like, oh, it's here. So that's a place that's likely to be haunted. I find that stores that sell statues and figurines of elementals or any religious iconography very high on that level of, like, if you're looking for a place that may have some activity. Cinemas, believe it or not. I found in the corner of a cinema, there was a corner near this couch they had put out for some visitors or patrons. There was a a strong portal, which I had verified by another medium, that had formed, and I think that portal was formed through a lot of activity in and out of the theater. And my from my reading and also from my experience, and also comparing from other people's experience, is that a lot of entities come in through that portal to soak up or absorb any fear or negative energies that people may feel in the cinema for horror movies. So when people get scared in a horror movie, they come in and people are expressing fear energy because they got frightened or shocked or scared. They eat that up and absorb that. Is that because our vibration at a base level is too high for them to absorb? That's why normal entities that are negative can't just go in and act vampirically to ordinary people. The people have to misqualify that energy to a denser level of energy that they can absorb and act in that vampiric fashion. So they tend to hang around with people where there's a lot of very sobby ones where you hear a lot of crying because it's sad, or horror ones. So cinemas are a good place to check out for portals.
I've recently watched a video on a Buddhist leader, and there are many different Buddhist sects. It's not the Dalai Lama, but it's it's a different guy, different branch. But he specifically said movie theaters are places where ghosts hang out.
No way! No way!
He said, and I just watched this video like 2 weeks ago. He said,
wow.
he said, be aware when you go to a movie theater, a spirit is going to walk through you. He went on to say what he does when it happens to him, but that's the first time I ever heard that.
旷野也有鬼，所以叫旷野鬼神众。西院里面的鬼也很多。你一走进去的话，你跟他对面，你没有看到他，他看到你啊。但是他记得他，你碰到他，你回去的话冷发热啊，全身不舒服啊，头痛啊，脚痛啊，连香港脚都痒啊。那个头皮呀、发麻啊，全身麻麻的啊，这什么做什么都没有精神。他跟着你回来了，这个就叫冲犯。
That's definitely interesting information, especially that horror movie info. That makes perfect sense. If you're a negative entity and you feed off of fear, that's the most logical place to go.
Yeah. So I think the horror movie in itself isn't problematic, but if it's something that affects you, if you're someone that is like, that's no different than a rubber ducky being cut in half because it's just rubber or plastic effects, and you are really jaded. If you're someone that's really jaded to that kind of stuff and you think it's funny or laughable because it's cheesy, I think that mightn't be so bad, but do know that you will be in an environment that will attract those kind of entities. Like, do I really want to hang out in a room full of that? If you're going to go laugh at something cheesy, maybe stay at home and rent it at home. I don't know. But anyway, I think that's really funny that that you came across that. I'm just amazed now. So that's cool. We had a store in the mall and a cinema, and another place I found is sometimes in spiritual sections of bookstores. The places with New Age books where people are opening up the book, they're reading the words, and they're focusing their minds and consciousness on the content of those books. So, and if it's repeatedly a lot of people, a lot of foot traffic that's built up over the years, sometimes a portal or some energetic static will be like a residue there, and I found that with a few different stores more than once. So sometimes the spiritual section of bookstores is another one.
You said spiritual artifacts, specifically statues.
Yeah.
And in Tombstone, I wanted to add this to the video, but I couldn't because the lady said, no filming, please, no cameras. So I couldn't film, so I turned off my camera, I just walked through, and it was full of Native American dolls. You know those Native American dolls?
Yeah.
And then it had drums. Pretty much Native American drums, Native American dolls in this section. And I walked to the corner, and I felt a really strong energy.
Wow.
And I immediately asked the lady if I can turn on my device and film it. And she said no. And then her friend who works there showed me a photograph someone took through the window of a spirit. So they even told me that's the same corner you were walking in. So I have to agree, spiritual artifacts, even Native American little statues, those are sacred to the ancient Native Americans. They wouldn't sell those to the white man, for example, because they consider them too sacred. And now, of course, you see them all over the place.
Another place, John, you just reminded me, and I forgot to add this in my my tick box of a few things to mention, was it was the Egyptian section of the University of Manchester Museum. There's the University of Manchester Natural History Museum that has a section full of Egyptian artifacts, including mummies and things that were buried with mummies. That room is full of activity. I don't know, there's no spirit specifically has come up to interact, but there's a massive charge in the room, just emanating, but nothing specific, no specific spirit, just a general. I think there might be a portal in that room, or something's been, those objects have been charged with something, or there might be something connected with it. But anyway, that's something else I noticed. If someone wants to go, just a tip, if someone wants to go in there with a meter and start measuring, go into that room. I'd love to hear if anyone is watching on your channel, if they want to go to that museum, what would come up. So yeah, just a suggestion. Another place as well is this is kind of cute, but wishing wells. Wishing wells, yeah. Or wishing fountains. Do some fountains. Wells or fountains where especially if it's little children that throw in pennies and they're genuinely thinking they're making a wish, and they're really, think, oh, I think my wish might come true. I found that there's a lot of that static energy around that as well, but it's not bad. It's just that it's very charged, but in a positive way. It's not creepy. But I found that there was like a static or a charge around those wells or fountains where a lot of people genuinely try and make a wish. It's like they're connecting. They're consciously trying to connect to something outside themselves, but even if they're atheists, they don't know that they're actually doing that. Or a child who doesn't really know what they're doing. So yeah.
Like
so
that might be connecting to a leprechaun or some type of sprite or something.
Oh, it doesn't. I tell you what, John, you're gonna be surprised. Do you know where I found it? Where I found one? It was in a mall fountain. There's a fountain in the mall that was full of coins. And then there's often the children are only like 3, 4, and 5 years of age throwing coins in. And there was a massive charge from that fountain because it's a lot of it's a place that's really popular with little children, and there are little parents are like, make a wish now, and the little kids are like, oh, make a wish, and they throw the penny in. And I found that had a lot of static. So there might be an elemental, but I can't imagine they want to hang out in the mall, which is a place that and it's full of chlorinated water. They don't like chlorinated water. They don't like malls. But I did find it there, so it doesn't necessarily even have to be even in nature.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's just another one I wanted to add. And here's the last one in terms of a place that I have found what I call a static charge, either indicative of a portal or spirit coming in and out, or it's funny because also a wish can be a form of prayer. A wish is a form of prayer that people are unaware of, believe it or not. People actually pray and they don't realize that that's what they're doing. And that it actually invites angels, by the way. And then angelic activity can leave a residue as well, but it's a different kind of energy. There's a lot of levels of energetic residue, I call it, with depending on the activity of what's going on. I find it really interesting. Lastly is funeral stores that sell grave headstones. There was a grave. It's funny because I didn't find anything in the graveyard. The graveyard has nothing, but there was some stores that would sell the headstones for the graveyard across the road. There was one particular store among about 3 stores near that graveyard that had the biggest portal I'd ever come across in my entire life. And it was in the corner of a room, and it was actually demonic.
Wow.
The level of negative energy, it made me almost want to vomit. It made me sick. It made me nauseous that I couldn't actually stay in the room. And I had another medium with me who said the exact same thing, so I had it verified.
Wow. Yeah, that kind of reminds me of my first experiment. I started to feel nauseous.
Yeah.
I probably accidentally opened up a portal I was just trying to do a simple experiment, innocent experiment. That's the reason why I stopped it when I realized what I was doing, I guess.
You probably did open up a portal by accident. All portals are almost opened by accident, unless you're Aleister Crowley, who purposely opens portals.
Yeah.
Everything else, people, it's based on ignorance. And another reason why I like your channel is trying to kind of come at a neutral angle and just try to dispel, like, hey, you know what, there's something there and we got to pay attention. And one of the reasons why I think that demonic portal was in, it's funny because that business is closed down. That business isn't open anymore. The other ones, all the other stores around him are still open that sell the headstones, but his is gone, the one with the portal. But the thing is that I think why the portal was vulnerable to that store, and this is just a theory, is because grief energy, grieving, unfortunately, it's quite a very dense energy, grief. And also, like, it's funny because in Islam, they have prescriptive mourning periods. Say, like, you have this time to mourn, process your feelings, and then you can't really mourn anymore. And people think that's really judgmental and say, oh, that sounds really harsh and strict. Why would you implement mourning periods and very prescriptively? And that's actually spiritual protection, is because even though we may be hurting, it also leaves us vulnerable to spiritual attack, because our defenses are down, our auras are weak, we have the energy of grief surrounding us, and that actually attracts entities that take advantage. So we are vulnerable, spiritually vulnerable, and you need to do a lot of self-care if you're suffering grief and loss, not just of a loved one, but after a breakup as well. So you'll end up like in addictive patterns that spirit also takes advantage of addictive patterns that also tend to exacerbate after grief experiences.
Yeah, I could say negative spirits, definitely will jump and attack at your weakest moment, both physically and spiritually. They know what it is, and they'll go for it.
Yeah.
And perhaps I was weak in 2011. I don't remember being weak, but I guess they can see what we can't.
Yes, they can. They can see right inside of you, John. They know what illnesses you have. They know what all of your energetic fields. They can see what's in all of your fields right down to your core. They can tell all of your, it's like the vibrational density of all of your emotions, thoughts, and beliefs. And they can find the densest point and hook in there, and they know they can, rob that and absorb that, and that's like a weak point, a crack that they can get in. Yeah, absolutely. But you know what, John? I think what you experienced, I think the majority of people actually experience that at some point in their lives. They're just not sensitive as you are and don't realize what's actually going on. It's like there's a chunk of the pie of their human experience that they can't account for, and they might, dismiss it off as something else.
Well, I have to stop a little bit there, because I did see physical objects, like a full-blown box, knock over a good 10, 20, 30 times. And a good bottle of water knock over a good 100 times. Regular people do not witness that. So I just have to, point blank, say I lived in a particularly very poltergeist-haunted room. And I moved out, and for the most part it's gone, but because I was open to it, other entities know that I know that it exists, so that maybe they try it.
It's because you're asking. You're asking for, you want physical manifestation, and some of them are being very generous, I suppose, with demonstrating that. I don't know. I will say I usually don't like if someone's moving things physically, that tends to not be something positive. That's trying to get attention.
Well, in 2011, I wasn't asking for it. I'm only asking for it on camera now to prove I'm not crazy, which is almost an impossible task, really, when it comes to spiritual things.
It's really rare. Whether it's a positive or a benevolent or a negative entity, it's quite rare for that manifestation to happen. It does happen, and you're quite lucky to have seen that. I have had stuff physically move very rarely, and it was while I wasn't looking. I actually had I think the main one I remember in terms of physically doing something to my stuff it was one of those fake plastic candles. Do you know the fake plastic candles that you have a switch on the bottom and it has a little light, the fake light that comes up? I had one of these and the battery was gone for like a year. And sometimes I'd look at it and you turned it upside down. The mechanism was you could turn it upside down to turn it on. So there was like a little weight in there that would flick it on if you kind of just, caught it up and turned it upside down, it will switch on, and then you put it back down again. It's like a little novelty. And I remember kind of every now and again I'd check and say, come on, there might be a little bit of battery power left. I'll get this on. And it never did. So after about a year, I just kind of let it standing there. I didn't bother getting the battery because the battery was a weird shape. And I remember one day I was having a bit of a hard time, and I was communicating with my guides about certain things that were going on. And I remember one morning I got up and I was trying to do my hair in the mirror. I had a little mirror, and that candle was nearby, and I looked at it, and it was on. And you know what? The battery was actually I didn't tell you this, but the battery had been actually taken out by now. So I checked the battery, and the battery had been taken out at this point, but the candle was on.
Wow.
I was like, that has to be turned. That mechanism tends to have to be turned upside down, or the weight to be moved to flick the mechanism to turn it on. And there was no battery in it, and the fake candlelight was on. So okay. And actually, it kind of creeped me out. So I took it up and I turned it upside down, and it turned it off, and I couldn't get it back on again. Couldn't get it back on again. So I was like, well, guys, do not do that again. That was freaking creepy.
Wow.
Oh.
I noticed a lot of mediums or people trying to communicate with the dead on YouTube, for example. The very few real ones that are not fake, a lot of times they will have a flashlight and ask it to turn on the flashlight, turn off the flashlight, or blink 1 for yes, 2 for no. And I've seen real videos. It looks real. It seems real to me. I get the vibe that it's real. And it freaks me out. I personally wouldn't do yes or no sessions, especially with an invisible being. You don't know what it is. But then again, I'm guilty of it too, I guess you could say. But I cut it off,
Yeah. They can mess with lights and light fixtures, but I would never ask somebody to communicate that way, because just from experience, entities that physically move stuff tend to not be good news. Just from experience, leave that alone. I'm not into it. I just want to see what else. Is there anything else? You asked another question regarding for the topic. It was, why do some spirits act the way they do, especially towards ghost hunters? Okay. I'm going to read out some home truths regarding attitudes, and this has been something that Spirit has repeatedly communicated to me with. And sometimes when I read material, what happens when my guides will give a very hot impression on my elbow that's about as hot as a radiator, it's that hot, but there's nothing burning. They will give that sensation, say, listen up, this part's important. Or sometimes they'll say that this person's BS as well. They will sometimes communicate that too, but more so they'll validate certain things and just say, look, this is important. So I'm going to read out some notes I took regarding regarding attitudes from Spirit. And it says, contact with Spirit is a gift, not an entitlement. Entitlement will turn some off. Some ghost hunters act like paparazzi, and like a living person, some people don't like paparazzi, neither do spirits. There you go.
That's a good point.
Entertainment purposes turn them off as well if they're genuine spirits that are benevolent. So some people don't like the idea of making a game show like some of those ghost hunter channels. That most genuine spirits hate that stuff. It's just, I don't know, it's just kind of something, perspective. If it's entertainment, it's like a form of entitlement. Again, it's a gift if there's a connection. So it's like, well, I'm going to go have this experience whether you like it or not, and I will fake it so my viewers will like my video. And it's like, oh my God, there's enough trouble with people trying to reach for a more spiritual attitude to life, and you want to jeopardize that with your stupid show or your stupid channel. So a lot of people are not a fan of that either.
On Ghost Adventures, on some episodes, they'll have a plan, a game plan, where they're talking amongst themselves, and they'll say, oh, we can do this. It'll trick the spirit into doing that. As if the spirit can't hear the game plan. As if the spirit isn't listening in on the whole conversation. So they almost approach it from an atheistic perspective when you really dissect how they even approach the subject. But spirits can listen in, especially if they're on the location outside the front gate having a private conversation. The spirit's going to overhear all that. So.
Yeah, if you think what happens, John, you're quite correct, John. And how that actually works is that your consciousness is a telephone line. If you're thinking about somebody intently and talking about them with one or more other person, it's literally like a direct phone line. Like you're talking on your mobile phone to somebody else, and their phone starts ringing. If you consciously think of a spirit and you're talking about them to another person, that is literally a phone call, and it's like, oh, somebody's calling me, and they'll choose to answer it or not. Sometimes they'll go directly and see what's going on. Sometimes they won't answer, and it's like, oh, someone's talking about me, but I'm not going to answer my phone. So it works like that very much. So yeah, that's very naive. Another point was that, oh yeah, if proof reasons like a scientist, but with genuine intentions and are open-minded, the communication will be inconsistent. They don't mind showing you in their own way that they're there, but not necessarily for others. The majority of benevolent contact is for you only. Yeah. Spirit has no problem in manifesting some undeniable sign for the whole world to see, know, feel, touch. So why don't they? And this is a point that I kind of went to explore that. It goes into more existential, philosophical reasons, but this is what Spirit has said to me, and you can take that with a grain of salt or not believe it. I'm not offended, I don't mind, but I'll give you my 2 cents on it. Too many different levels of growth on the planet. There is no ultimate truth for a lot of spiritual teachings. You wouldn't give methadone to a well person, but you could save the life of a heroin addict. So what might be good for one person might be bad for another. And some people will use a spiritual teaching that might be outmoded for their level of growth as an excuse to stagnate their growth. Not all teachings or evidences are appropriate, because some people, they can very easily misuse that. An example of misuse is, is looking for something external to save them. Like it's Jesus for Christians, that people don't have to account for their growth. They say, oh, I'm just saved because I believe in Jesus as my Lord and Savior, and that's it. There's nothing else I have to do. Some New Age people look for alien contact. Aliens are going to come and give us advice on how to save our planet. Secularists think socialism and state care are going to save them in terms of their well-being, a non-spiritual well-being. That socialism is their god, or capitalism, money is their god, and they're always looking for something outside of themselves to save them from themselves or to grow themselves. And the thing is with Spirit, if it was to do an undeniable manifestation where like, hey, look, this is undeniable proof, let's replicate it, manifest it, and share it, what will happen is that to contrive proof and manifestation repetitiously in controlled environments like scientists do would lead to, the word is commodification of Spirit. Commodification, and that is like the worst thing you could do is to commodify it, and it can be manipulated. Spirits also said there will come a time in the future, and it's a promise in the far future, that those kind of outer manifestations will happen. It'll happen in courtrooms where someone can access the crimes of another person and say that no one can get away with a crime. someone's murdered somebody else, someone has a missing persons case, where we'll be guaranteed access in a very methodical way and, have spirit serve us in that way. But, the idea of these, what we call an undeniable manifestations as proof, is for the individual and not for the mass. So, there's rules and why is there a difficulty? Does spirit have difficulty? And says no. There's like an overall spiritual rule that is kind of governing the planet right now that can change, but it's up to us to make that change, not spirit to make that change.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, can I just put my thoughts on trying to prove it as a scientist? Like, for example, there's a movie called The Entity, based on a true story of a lady who was particularly harassed by up to 3 demons. And some scientists from the university contacted even more legitimate scientists to do a test and a study. And what happened was the study resulted in the legitimate scientist running away scared. And the parapsychologists, they are founders in the field, but no one takes them seriously. That's the result of that study. But my suggestion would be go to the most haunted building in the world, turn it into a laboratory, and study it for a year straight, with cameras running for a year straight, and have a crew. And perhaps you could prove something, perhaps not. But I don't think direct, full-blown conversations would take place.
Well, and also some people forget that what happens in Brunei or Togo, West Africa, we're talking about the whole world, and also corruption in politics, as well as injustices and just how people work, the human psychology and misuse. You got to look at every country in the world and account for that, not just your own, saying, hey, you know what? My country worked really hard to spiritually grow. I think we deserve to go next level in terms of that stuff. No, it's about the whole world. Every country matters. It's about the whole, every person on the planet, and it's about the mean level that every person is on. So we will in the future. It's not right now, but you can do experiments. Hey, a miracle is undeniable proof. Well, the majority of people still didn't believe. Yes, it was a sign and got people's attention to listen to a teaching, but it still actually was not enough. A lot of people rejected it and called it just stage magic tricks like David Blaine or Darren Brown. Yeah. They called it this guy's Darren Brown. Even 2,000 years ago, even though we think, oh, they had an undeniable manifestation that proved this. And it says the majority of people still didn't believe, even with that. So,
like you said, that Egyptian room was charged with energy. The Egyptians were full-blown magicians. They practiced a lot of magic. Their religion, the more I study their religion, their religion was a mishmash of many different past religions. They kind of formulated it from a bunch of different cultures. And so if that story is true, where they turned a staff into a snake, I mean, it's just word of mouth. Only a few people saw it. So people are going to dismiss even something as phenomenal as that.
The one where Jesus curses a branch. He gets annoyed and curses a branch, and because they were like traveling for a long time, the apostles, and they're looking for fruit. The fig tree, yeah. Manipulate material to manifest, but you can also, through the negative intentions of your thoughts, destroy things as well. Mm-hmm. And he fully realized what was possible with his consciousness, and that caught everyone off guard. That actually did happen. And it's funny because even though I've known that for a while, I saw a video. I'll find it and send it to you. They had a group of school children with 2 potted plants in separate containers at a school, and they had all the kids to send loving thoughts and say nice things to the nice plant. And to this other plant, you got to bully the plant and say very nasty things like "I hate you, you're useless." And they had the little kids do that for a couple of months, and they actually came back with a video cam, and they said the plant that got abuse was actually started to die, and the other one was fine. And I was just like, hey, that's like the same story we had. It's just like the slower version. It's just basically like the slower version of what, apparently was the other thing. It's like we're kind of like a really weak version of what's already possible because it's not there yet. But I laughed and I was just like, because then people were saying that's an anti-bullying video. Look, it hurt the plant. I'm like, this is like a scientific consciousness study that you have just done that is absolutely genius, and you are putting this into a kid's bullying video.
That's a cool study. I never heard that one. That's a good point. Plants can definitely... I've heard studies of plants being blasted with different types of music, but I never heard that one before.
Yeah, I know the music one as well, the vibration from music. To manifest, undeniable proof would cause political problems as well. Political dissidents, if you were a medium, you could get kidnapped, used politically, and made to extract information through the Secret Service. Yeah. If you could undeniably access every time all information, there's more problems than humans could possibly ever imagine if, things were, guaranteed to be replicated every time in a very systemic, scientific manner. So basically, the overall gist from Spirit is like more problems than they solve, and it distracts people from doing the work and take responsibility from themselves. Yeah. They say Spirit will do it for me. I'm like, no, dude, you gotta own your what.
It reminds me, if a spirit just manifested and everyone could see it, the media would react like it was an alien visiting the Earth, and aliens, landing on the White House. And a ghost that didn't disappear would pretty much be treated like an extraterrestrial, A
lot of people would pay attention to that, and they would forget to maybe self-examine the fact that they bullied one of their coworkers, keep on bullying their coworker, and say, hey, this alien that landed or this ghost that manifested way more important than sorting whatever thing that happened at work, even though that's way more important than that outer manifestation. Basically spirituality matters more. It's the spirit context. Like, okay, what I experience is secondary. It's an after effect of, walking my path. I don't go looking for it. I've never had to look for it. It's an after thing. I went to the museum to see the tram repair. I didn't go looking for that guy. I saw the plaque with the dogs, and I was just, I paid tribute to the dogs, and that just happened afterwards. I didn't go in there ghost hunting for an entity. It was always after. So I think if people want like a genuine spiritual experience, that you don't have to go looking for it always. It'll come to you if you kind of consciously work on yourself. You'll see synchronicity is one of the biggest ones. Bumping into like people calling you and you just thought about them or something like that. I like that the best. I've had a lot of those. But anyway, those are all our points. I think we wanted to cover today.
Okay.
I don't have anything else unless there's anything else you want to add or talk about.
I said I've never been to the UK, so I can't compare. But you have mentioned ghosts in both the USA and the UK. But from what I've heard, just the history, like you said, of the UK. What did you say about that? Why it's more haunted?
Oh, it's just because it has more history, essentially. It's been has a higher population density. It's been populated for a lot longer than the US. Therefore, more actions have been taken on. It's simply a math number. More things have happened, more injustices, poor quality of life. It simply is just that. Also, the Americans. America, its vibration is actually, you can tap into the vibration of a country. Certain countries have a different vibration according to the land. America's is higher than England and the UK. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. I think the UK is one of the densest countries I've lived in so far. There's a lot of energetic layers and patterns just superimposed that have never been cleared. There's you need to get. I think they need a professional energetic dust buster into the country. Kind of like you have vermin busters, you need an energetic dust buster, because if you're anyway sensitive to that, I'm just like, you're walking around with a headache a lot. You know, if you're as sensitive as I am, my thing is actually pretty bad in that it's a curse as well as a blessing, because I can't cut everything out. Where I'm sensitive to things that I didn't know, I didn't plan to be sensitive like this, just how I am. Is I also feel the things I don't necessarily want to feel, and I don't like that.
Wow.
I'll tell you one particular haunting recently. My friend lived in Liverpool for a little while, and she's originally from Australia. And when she was living in this place in Liverpool, an apartment near the shore, she said she saw this figure of a black man looking extremely angry, standing at the dock and looking straight at her with this fierce anger from his eyes, looking at her. And she said it was the creepiest thing, and she said she didn't like it because he'd never go away. He was always there, and she could kind of see him really easily. She's a medium as well. I referred to her earlier on with the corner of the room. She said that I think this guy's what we call the fragment, that soul fragment where his proper soul is passed on and is fine, but that energetic fragment through trauma or something has been left behind, and it's kind of landlocked and stuck to that location. And she said she researched into it about the history of that dock in that area, and she said there was as part of that history of that area, there was 20 black slaves that were drowned purposefully. Something had happened where there were some white British people at that dock, and they had actually purposely drowned and murdered 20 slaves, because I don't know if there was like a fight or a rebellion, or I don't know what was the full story, but those people died traumatically, and it was when there were black slaves during the slave trade era where they left that dock.
Wow.
So that makes sense. Just saying.
So extreme negative vibes from that area, and that's scary.
Yeah.
So, I want to visit some castles personally.
Oh, yeah.
Castles generically are haunted, right? I mean...
I'm just thinking back now in terms of castles I visited. Oh, there's a house here, Ortsel Hall. There's even a plaque in the actual. It's like a Tudor style home. Even though I think, I don't know when it was built exactly, a couple of centuries. But there's a plaque inside saying, there's supposedly a ghost in there, and this is actually local to here. And it's warning that this entity pinches the butts of female ladies. It sexually harasses the ladies that come in there. And I've come across, I've had an entity that sexually harassed me. It do things like that. I've come across them. They exist. But apparently there's one down in that hole. I haven't experienced him yet. I don't want to. But old manor houses do count as well as the castles. So don't forget, do the manor houses as well.
Okay.
They because of the history. The historical aspect.
Yeah, some people say they get scratched. I don't think I've ever been scratched.
No, I haven't either. Yeah. I've had a tingling. It's like, do you know the static electric metal balls that you put your hand on it and your hair stands on end? That sensation you get when you touch one of those. I've had that across my body in places I did not want to feel. By ones that harassed me before in the past. And they actually, the ones that harassed me, like you were saying, harassed you, they had come in when I was going through a period of grief in my life as well. So I associated with that. I was in a really bad shape for about a year and a half, grief-wise. So you don't recommend it. I consider myself an intuitive. I prefer that term because actually to call yourself a psychic medium, you actually need a certificate to say that. You need a profession. It's a professional title, and you actually can get certified to say you meet minimum required standard to do that. I've never taken a test. But a lot of people, if you just say you're an intuitive, it's just like, oh, what's that? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. It sounds very wishy-washy.
I don't think in the USA we need a certificate. I think you could just make it up. I don't think there's a psychic certifying place other than the 1-900. Is there?
There is. Yes, there is in America because I went to there was some sort of a convention I attended in Portland, Oregon. And I was speaking to a young man, and he says, yeah, I've taken actual tests where I'm certified, and I actually advertise the fact that I am certified. I've passed these particular tests. And I said, that's actually really neat, because then they have to do some sort of proof. But the thing is that the people that are taking the tests, those results are never made public. They're destroyed, and it's just like, that's for you to know. So it's kind of almost like a one-on-one like, when people go to see mediums and they have a message or whatever, and it's a one-on-one thing, and it's for them and them only. Mm-hmm. Their certification is for them and them only, and that information is not shared with people. So whatever it is that they've got going on, they have some sort of cooperation from spirit to do that. Even though I will say there's psychometry you can do. That's a spirit experiment, is where you pick up an object, and if a medium is trying to get the history of an object or a place. Those experiments can work regardless. And I think those ones are really good and are the best ones if somebody wants to prove that intuitive abilities, do exist, is something that can tap into the history of a room. Now, the reason why, you have James Randi and those people that say, oh, come and do my test so you can prove you're not bullshit. And the reason why people can't do the James Randi challenge, I think that's his name anyway, his last name's Randi, is because human experiences are not anomalous enough, meaning that it's kind of like I want you to come in here and win the lottery for me on this specific day. And it's like, there's nothing in human, like, say, if you guessed, well, somebody was stabbed to death in this room at some point. And it's like, what is the likelihood of somebody being stabbed in this room, that their death occurred that way? That his ratio, where the odds had to be something like 1 in a million, or one, I don't remember the exact figure, but a lot of the experiments that people were proposing that they could complete for him and demonstrate, they're demonstrative experiments that had to be self-funded, fund everything themselves, and that was really expensive for a lot of people. And even if they could do it, Randy always says that it didn't meet the conditions for probability. The probability was too high, and saying, well, human experience tends to be kind of generic. They're not very unique. Whatever it is that you want to prove, like, say, a lot of people in the world could say, like, oh, I had that experience as well. That's not something unusual. So one of the biggest barriers to the Randy challenge was that money, first of all, for a lot of these just ordinary people who do have abilities but don't have money, and secondarily that Randy kept dismissing their experiments as not being of, the probability wasn't high enough on that, where it blow their minds.
I would take up Randy, even though I know he said he already spent the money, so he doesn't have the $1 million anymore. But I would do it for free. But like you said, he might say, that's not good enough. He might say that at the end, so it's kind of a risk going in, but I'd do it. And what I would do is I have a certain idea. I would tell my darkest, scariest demon stories, and stuff happens. Stuff starts to happen. That's how I can manifest crazy stuff,
Yeah, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, literally, and that's when that synchronicity comes in. If someone's ready to hear a message or, watch one of your channels or explore this stuff, they'll find it when they're ready. And it's just like, hey, I'm ready for something different in my life. I think there might be more to this. And they'll come across a book or a video or something that will resonate with that next step. So I wouldn't look to find people that are not ready to be challenged. I'd say just put your stuff out there, You be you, just speak your truth, and let people who are ready for the next step find you, because that's the way it's supposed to work. That's what Spirit says anyway. Is like, you just do you, and you will attract, the people that will resonate with you and find you. And that's how that works. You don't go looking to make a fight with someone that says you're bullshit.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I'm not going to share any other details, but I'm sure the people that watch this channel are going to be greatly appreciative of the information you shared with me. It's very interesting stories, details. I believe everything you experience is true. You come off as a genuine person. You're telling the truth. That's what this channel is all about, is seeking truth, speaking the truth. I thank you for sharing. You're welcome to come on again in the future.
Yeah. I'd like to hear some user comments for question, if there's anything, maybe a specific topic in the future, or things that people want to explore as well, to feel free and write that in the comments so we can look at that and maybe, give inspiration for something that John can do in the future, or maybe anything I could add.
All right. Well, thank you.
Right.
And I'm going to be signing off and be seeing you.
Bye.